Hello. If you're watching this video, then it's highly likely that you're into bird photography or thinking about getting into bird photography. Well, you only have to watch a couple of minutes of YouTube to realize that a lot of videos are chasing wild exotic birds in far-flung places, and it can sometimes be a bit demoralizing and a bit off-putting, especially when we can't all afford or have access to the wilds of Patagonia or Timbuktu or Iceland or these far-flung places. Well, bird photography doesn't have to be like that. I set out this morning into my very own back garden and caught this amazing photo of a robin. It's not exotic, it's not in some far-flung land. You may only have access to your local area, a woodland, a park, and it's all about getting the most out of what you've got. Not sitting there wishing that you could afford that exotic holiday to South America. Now in the Northern Hemisphere, it's slowly turning into autumn. The days are getting shorter. The weather's just, well, typically miserable as it is most of the year round here in the United Kingdom. What better I thought it would be just to give everyone a little bit of motivation to know that you have some fantastic wildlife and birds right on your doorstep, and you shouldn't use any excuse to not go out there with your camera and take some photos of these amazing birds.
Bollocks.
Now today's video is all about editing your small bird or autumnal birds in Lightroom. There is a few prerequisites to capturing these birds, and that is to have some form of DSLR camera or mirrorless camera, which you can see here in the background, and also some kind of telephoto lens. Now it doesn't have to be the most expensive camera in the world, but I would probably err towards spending a little bit more of your budget on getting a decent lens. This one you see here, which I regularly shoot on, is a Sigma 150 to 600 millimeter, but anything like a 470 to 400 mil, or maybe even an 18 to 150 millimeter lens will do. A lot of these autumnal birds, if the conditions are right, they'll come quite close to you. So if you haven't got the biggest reach lens in the world, please don't worry too much. And also, if you have time, just check out this video about the essentials of bird photography. I've had a fair bit of practice now, so I've got this photograph pretty much okay in camera. There are a few little things like being at eye level with the bird, having that nice soft background, not having too much of a harsh sky in the background, but it's all in that video. If you want to follow along with this video, go and watch it afterwards, and then it will give you even more motivation to go out in the field and get some amazing photos. Now this is the raw photo, which I've put a link in the description below, so if you want to follow along you can. Just before I do any adjustments, just get the composition on this photograph. So if we go over to the cropping tool, I feel, let's just have a look, if we go 5:4 and then just flip it to portrait, let's just get Mrs. Robin, just so she's on the first third there. And I think what helps with this photo is we've got foreground out of focus, background out of focus, and we've got a few kind of leading lines and a nice diagonal line here, ultimately leading to Mrs. Robin here. When I'm taking the photo, obviously I'm getting the subject matter right in the middle of the crosshairs on my focus, and then obviously, as you can see, with this being a full frame lens, quite good flexibility to zoom in and crop in post. So I'm kind of going to go with this composition for now. All right, so now I've got my crop and I'm in Adobe Standard. I am just going to put the saturation up ever so slightly, only because it looks a little bit flat at the moment. So let's just push those nice colors up to about 20. Actually, tell you what, that's a bit too much. Let's go to 15. And the first thing I like to do on the photo is push the background a little bit further away from the viewer's attention. So if we go over to masking, now I'm not going to do the obvious and let the software select the background for me. I'm just going to brush in a bit of the background. So I'm going to create a new brush, and then I'm immediately going to go all the way down to texture. That goes all the way down to -100. So does the clarity. and then just use my middle mouse wheel just to make the brush a little bit bigger, and then just paint out some of these details in the background, just because I've got Mrs. Robin in focus, but some of the leaves and twigs in the foreground are out of focus, and I don't think the software is going to do a very good job of selecting the entire background for me. Just quicker and easier if I do it like that. So I'm not going to do any color or light adjustments to the background, but what I am going to do is give the photo a sense of light direction, or where the light's coming from. So to do that, I'm going to go up and create a new mask and linear gradient, and just, we can see that we're thinking that the light in this photo came from the top left. So I'm going to draw in a linear gradient, and apologies for the way I sound, but I've just recovered from a steaming cold, just to about there. Now, I don't want Mrs. Robin affected by this gradient, so I'm going to go on to mask 2 and go to subtract and then subject, and hopefully it should work out that Mrs. Robin is the subject, and there we go, she's not affected by this mask. So all I'm going to do with this is just go to the exposure, just brighten that top half of the image up ever so slightly. In actual fact, I might just click back on the linear gradient and then just drag it over just a little bit more. Whoops, no, not rotate. Just there. And has she still? Yep, she's still excluded along with the branches. So I think that should do it. Just ever so subtle here. Now the next thing I'm going to do is work on the photo overall. If we go back to the main adjustment page, I think we probably need just to raise the exposure on this slightly. The highlights, I think we're okay for highlights, so we're just going to leave them where they are. The shadows, possibly we're just going to bring the shadows out ever so slightly, about 32, so about 30. And then let's just bring, actually if we bring the shadows down, kind of gives us a bit of nice contrast. So yeah, let's minus down the shadows. The whites in the photo, just bring them up ever so slightly, and the blacks just down ever so slightly. And then if I just flip between before and after, you can see we've got a bit of nice contrast going on. I think we need to put that background even further away from the viewer's attention, so there is a little bit of yellow in the background, so yellow is selected by default on the color mixer. Let's just desaturate the photo just a little bit, just because that yellow in the background is just distracting me. The main colors here are kind of the grays and the oranges. And then let's just take it away from the standard colors. And one of the ways I like to do that is just in the shadows, just bring the shadow. We've got orange, so contrasting color from orange is blue. Now let's just go slightly away from blue to purple, ever so subtly about there. And that looks a bit more like a painting rather than the photo. Now Mrs. Robin just needs to pop from the photo. We've done the background, we've done the light, we've kind of color graded it and given it a bit more contrast, but the main subject here, Mrs. Robin, let's just make her pop a little bit. So a new mask now, which is going to be a radial mask, a radial gradient should I say, and just center of Mrs. Robin, just going to draw out just there so it's nice and the fall off is nice and smooth. And then I think all we're going to do is just a bit of exposure. And then just rescue some of the highlights a little bit. I think that will probably do us. Yeah, it's all about being very subtle. And if you've got a good photo in camera, why mess with it? Now the only thing left to do is just, if we go back to the adjustment tool and zoom in, just want to sharpen this up a little bit. And plain and simply, the way I do that, no messing around, just go to sharpness. Default seems to be 40. Let's just push it up to about 80. And then we can see before and after. You might not be able to see this on the YouTube video, but it's just added a little bit of sharpness to the photo overall. Do you know what? I'm not quite happy with the crop on this. Let's just go back to crop. Let's extend that out to catch that twig there. Whoops. And then let's just bring that down as far as we can. Only because she's kind of sitting just above these nice coloured leaves. And they kind of reflect the orange that's on her chest. So let's just have a look at that. Okay, that's a little bit better now. She's not contained in a box now. She's got a little bit more freedom around her. We've got that foreground element, the robin, and then the background element. And then do we just remove that? Is that a bit annoying? Let's just remove that bit. Remove. I think that looks a bit better overall. Let's just check that. Update. Okay, yeah, she's sitting in a scene now rather than being contained in a box. Birds, they like to be free, right? Overall, that looks autumnal. It's telling a story. It's got a subject. It's got a background. It's got a sense of light. So that's essentially the photo edited, and it wasn't anything too labor intensive. We also didn't have to travel a million miles. I stepped out into my back garden. If you're lucky to have a back garden or a garden space, then you've probably seen birds frequent it quite regularly. If not, it's a trip to your local woodland or park. Or if you live in the city, these birds also love to dwell in the city. So everybody watching probably has the opportunity to capture these amazing little birds. Now, I'm quite happy to send this photograph out as a Christmas card or a birthday card, or enter it into a local calendar competition. All we've got to bear in mind is there are a few simple rules to this genre of photography, and check out my video on bird photography essentials will put you in good stead and on the right path to capture amazing photos like this one. Please stay tuned, and thank you for watching.